Hello, and welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit, curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly,
And I'm Jennifer Smith.
and today we're going to have an affair with Leslie Marmon Silko and her short story, Lullaby. So since we have never read from this author before, of course, we have to do a little bit of an author bio, a background, so that we can acquaint ourselves with her. Leslie Marmon Silko was born on March 5th, 1948 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she's a writer of Laguna Pueblo, white and Mexican descent, who grew up on the Laguna Pueblo Reservation. She is deeply influenced by her mixed heritage, and she incorporates Laguna traditions and storytelling into her work. After graduating with honors from the University of New Mexico in 1969, Silko briefly attended law school before pursuing writing, publishing her first story, The Man to Send Rain Clouds, that same year. She is a central figure in the Native American Renaissance, which I'll explain in a minute, and she is best known for her acclaimed novel Ceremony, which was published in 1977, which explores healing, identity, and cultural continuity through the story of a mixed-race World War II veteran. Her writing often reflects themes of community, tradition, and the interconnectedness of all life. Silko has received numerous honors, including a MacArthur Foundation grant in 1981, the Native Writers Circle of America's Lifetime Achievement Award in 1994, and the Robert Kirsch Award in 2020, solidifying her legacy as one of the foremost voices in Native American and contemporary literature. Okay, I've said enough. So, Jennifer, why don't you tell us what this story, Lullaby, is about?
Oh, I would love to. Leslie Marmon Silko's short story, Lullaby, is a deeply moving exploration of loss, memory, and cultural identity as experienced by Aya, a Navajo woman. Set among falling snow beneath a cottonwood tree, the story follows Aya's recollections of her past, the joy at the birth of her eldest son, Jimmy, and the anguish of his death in combat in the Vietnam War. Interwoven with this grief is the painful memory of losing her two younger children, Danny and Ella, who were taken away by government authorities under the guise of health concerns. Through Aya's memories, Silko portrays the enduring sorrow and resilience born from cultural disconnection and personal loss. So, Joey, what is the Native American Renaissance? Tell us more about that period of time.
I feel like a lot of people don't realize that that's a thing. I feel like they think of the Renaissance, which was in Europe after the Middle Ages and after Reformation. The Native American Renaissance was a cultural and literary movement that emerged in the late 20th century, marking a powerful resurgence of indigenous voices in storytelling. It began in the 1960s and brought a surge of works by Native American authors who explored identity, heritage, and the contemporary struggles of their communities. So writers such as N. Scott Momaday, Leslie Marmon Silko, Sherman Alexie, and Joy Harjo played central roles in shaping this revival, blending traditional narratives with modern literary forms to address issues of cultural survival, self-determination, and representation. The movement not only revitalized Native literature, but also deepened public understanding of Indigenous experiences, inspiring future generations to celebrate and preserve their stories. So a similar thing is happening. It's as in the Renaissance that we all are aware of. It's a resurgence of culture and art, and a lot of people are doing it. And the Harlem Renaissance is another one that is in our more modern era compared to the actual Renaissance of Europe. And some of the most important works from this era are Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Silko, which we just mentioned, Housemaid of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday, Winter in the Blood by James Welch, The Jailing of Cecilia Capture by Janet Campbell Hale, and Bear Heart by Gerald Weisner. I have read some of these because I studied the Native American Renaissance when I was in college, going for my English degree. So I'm a little bit more familiar with a lot of these authors because I've read a lot of their stuff. But I wanted to share that because it's so important, and I hope people don't overlook that. There's so many great works from this era. There's other stuff too. It's not just literature, but literature is what we're talking about, obviously.
What came up for me when you said that is that I remember so strongly seeing the movie Smoke Signals, which starred an all Native American Indian cast. It was written, as you had mentioned, by a Native American screenwriter. It was beautifully done. I still remember where I was watching this story unfold 27 years ago in 1998, very long time ago. Joey, I think one of the things that deserves mentioning when we talk about this in relationship to the Harlem Renaissance, we talk a lot about what happened during the Civil War and the Jim Crow era and all of the racism that was permeating. The Harlem Renaissance is a bit of a reflection on that. So I think for people who are not familiar with the plight of the Native Americans, they really got a raw deal in our society. I think this movement started in the 60s or early 70s. And it was really a moment for this entire community to come together. We say it's a reclaiming of their culture. Native American stories are generally not written down, right? It's an oral tradition. So it was this very strong concentration of we're here, we're proud, we're not going anywhere, and we are really tired of how we're being treated. So in addition to the women's movement, which was really taking off in the early 70s for the United States, the Indian movement was also right there, Joey. So I think it just deserves noting. Thank you for bringing it to our attention right now because we are in, as you had told me earlier, Native American Heritage Month. So this feels very timely. And we're recording this on Veterans Day. There's also an element of honoring veterans and thinking about the nature of war in this story.
It all ties together. This was an accident that has just happened to be doing it this day. So congrats to us. We really did that. Jennifer, have you ever heard of this author before, or is this your first time hearing of her?
It's my absolute first time reading her. I've read this story multiple times. It was so beautifully crafted and so grounded and left me with a lot of questions for myself. So I'm really grateful, Joey, that you brought this one to the table for us to read. How about you?
I don't think I had actually read her ever before, but I knew who she was. Like I said, I read a lot of other Native American authors from that class in college and in general. But she was one that I had not read, but I meant to get to. And now I definitely want to read Ceremony. I saw on some website, I can't remember what it was, that she said while she was writing Ceremony, she was living in Alaska, but she's obviously from New Mexico originally. And she was homesick so much that so much of the landscape of New Mexico went into that story. I haven't read it, so I can't say this yet, but I have a feeling it's similar to Ulysses because I bet that you could recreate a lot of the landscape from her writing. In this story, I don't know where she was when she wrote it, but the landscape is a character in this. Like, it is so evocative. It is so easy to picture. Usually this is something you'll say, Jennifer, is like, I can use all five senses in this story, and usually say that about Virginia Woolf. But I think that Silko, this is a perfect explanation for her because her writing is so in tune with nature and it's so beautifully done. But anyway, what did you think about this story?
So, Joey, as I do often say, it encompassed all of my five senses. One of the things that I particularly loved about this story, which resonated with me and my lived experience as a person growing up in Michigan, which is not New Mexico, is that she makes a very clear drawing attention to the direction which the woman is looking. She's like, I am looking east towards the sun. I am looking to the south. I am feeling the wind on my skin. I am watching the hawks circle overhead. And for me, I don't have an amazing sense of direction, but I always know where the east is and the west is because growing up for 25 years of my life, I could put myself in that natural environment. So I really loved her ability to very seamlessly, it was not performative. It was like, this is the way that I experience every day of my life. And when I was growing up, I was in a military organization. I went away to a summer camp. We had those scratchy blankets that she was talking about from the military that are olive green. They're really not great. And I could just see her putting that over her head. It was just so beautiful, Joey. And then the last thing I'll say about the evocative nature of her scene setting, I don't even want to talk about the dark topics that have arisen in the story. The scene where she has walked outside, she has this beautiful long, which is now gray, hair. And the snow, I don't know if you've ever walked a long ways, Joey, in the snow, but I have definitely done that in my childhood. The snow just kind of piles up on your hair. She walks into this warm room and she describes how it just starts melting away. Everyone is looking at her as the other. And she said, I don't care if they're looking at me because they are seeing a woman who has nothing left to lose. I hope they're afraid of me. And I just thought that was really quite an evocative image of walking in the snow and then coming into a place that has a wood stove, like where I grew up, and just having the steam rise off of you because you are shedding the natural world to kind of get some comfort.
Yeah, I think there are so many images that will stick with me with this story. I got emotional Every time I read this story, the ending got me. I was like, "Oh my god." This morning I was reading it and I, like, started crying on the couch drinking coffee because the ending is so powerful and poignant. It's just, like, the perfect ending, and of course, we're gonna talk about that. I think the ending is what really solidified this for me as being something that I wanted us to discuss. I think the whole story is great and is worthy of discourse and scholarship, but I think the ending being the titular lullaby that is referenced, obviously, in the title, is so impactful and is just so heartbreaking when you read it.
And Joey, before we read it, can we actually just give the hat tip to the author? One of the things that I had read about her background is that she does not do straightforward standard storytelling. She puts in poetry and she intersperses musicality into her writing. And so, for those of you who have not had a chance yet to read the story, the very last passage that Joey is very elegantly and evocatively going back to, it's poetry. It's a lullaby. It's literally, you can hear those words being sung to a mother and a child across the generations. And it is really haunting, but also just totally beautiful.
Yeah, haunting is a good word for that, actually. And it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that, but that in the context of the story it is. So you're gonna have to read it now to figure out why I say that.
What struck me, again, I didn't know anything about this author before we read the story. We just talked about the author's bio. The fact that she went to law school made me curious about her because there is nothing preachy, letter of the law. There's nothing in the story that would reflect her professional experience, but there is so much about the inherent pressures that the Indian nation was under, people stealing their children, whether they were drafted into the army and killed in combat, or whether they were deemed to be in a dangerous situation by living at home in their native community and literally being stolen from their parents and put into these children community homes. And I think throughout recent times, we have heard so many people who've survived that experience saying, "You don't have any idea what happened to me. I was punished for speaking my language. I was ashamed to be a Native American person because I was told that that was no good." She puts those elements in this story, but it's a little nod. I think you have to have a little bit of understanding what really happened. It's like if we talk about the Jim Crow South, if you don't know the full story, you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. So you had to like, use a different entrance. Why is that such a big deal? And let me just tell you why that was such a big deal. And so the fact that she says that she hates her husband because he is the person who taught her English. And if she had not learned to speak English and write her name, which she was so proud that she could sign her name, she could claim herself, right? She's like, I can sign my name using the English language. See, now I'm going to get choked up, Joey. She's like, that was the thing that they used to steal my kids. I didn't know what I was signing. I can't read. I can just make my name. I can leave my mark. And I was like, you guys, that sucked. I was just so angry, Joey. So I'll transition that back to you. But all the background context of the injustice was looming as a character in the background.
Yeah. And I think what makes this story even more impactful, as if that could be a thing, because it's already a great story, is that Aya seems to be experiencing all of this grief and regret and loss, all of these negative emotions, almost all at the same time, simultaneously, because the story is told in a non-linear structure. It's hard, I think, for an author to do that successfully in such a short story. Like, this is 6 pages on the PDF that I got. So that's not a lot of time to tell an entire story, pack that much detail in, and tell it in a nonlinear way. That is impressive. I was fully impressed by the author's skill to do that. Uh, and we get the sense that she is connected to all things. We have the opening scene where she's sitting in the snow. I'll just read the first 3 sentences. The sun had gone down, but the snow and the wind gave off its own light. It came in thick tufts like new wool, washed before the weaver spins it. Aya reached out for it like her own baby's head, and she smiled when she remembered how she had laughed at them. She was an old woman now, and her life had become memories. She sat down with her back against the wide cottonwood tree, feeling the rough bark on her backbones. She faced east and listen to the wind and snow sing in a high pitch. So we have this sense that she is fully connected to her physical environment, to nature, because she is engaging with this cottonwood tree. She can feel the rough bark on her spine. It should be this very uncomfortable moment. She's outside, it's winter, it's snowing. It's deep enough that it's quickly filling in her tracks as she goes. She's leaning up against a tree with rough bark, but she's not uncomfortable. She's very much in her element. We get this sense that she is very much connected, but this goes back to she's connected to all time for the entire story. She is experiencing the grief of losing Jimmy, her eldest son, and losing Danny and Ella, her two younger children. It's really just such an impactful way of showing how interconnected everything is in her life, at least. This sort of reminded me of Catabasis because I wasn't really sure what time this was supposed to be taking place in. There are some clues based on what's going on in the stories. Because Danny and Ella are removed, and that's most likely happening because of the IAP, which is the Indian Adoption Project, which was a federal initiative that sought to erase Native American culture by forcibly removing Native children from their families and placing them with white foster or adoptive households. That program ran from 1958 to 1967, and that was followed by an effort to extend it into the 1970s. We can sort of get an idea of in what time frame that this is happening. And then, of course, we have the Vietnam War, which is happening. So we get a sense that maybe Jimmy dies earlier during the war, which could potentially lead to more grief, to be like he literally just left and now he's no longer here. But that is my investigation skills. That's how I placed it.
I want to go back to that very first opening scene because, as you said, she's evoking so many emotions. She's like, I'm an old woman right now. So all of my life has solidified into memory. She's not thinking of the future. She's like, all I'm doing is retrospectively looking backward. I am experiencing this. And then in the very next portion, she says, but I'm having this joyful experience of seeing the snow and thinking it is like cotton wool. And I don't know if you've ever touched native wool that has been sheared from a sheep before it has been spun into yarn, but it is very fluffy and big. And it just makes you want to go, like this really playful feeling. It invoked joy in me having her recount that. Yes, I know what that feels like. It is a childlike wonder sort of thing. And Joey, when you were taking us back to when did this happen? Yes, the telegram that she gets stating that her son has been killed. A man from the government comes and he has the paperwork and the father says, don't even give his body back. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. The reason I bring this up is that she has a child who is still nursing, right? So a child probably under 2 years old, while she has a son who is at least 18 who has gone into the armed services. And the reason I bring this up is that my mother's mother had children since the time she was 15 to 45.
Whoa.
She had 12 children. She had a very long reproductive cycle. And the only reason I'm saying that is that there were echoes of my grandmother who was very rooted in the earth, was very earthy. She could garden. She always knew which direction. All of these very lost arts to me as a person who was born in a different generation. What I was saying is that this woman has referenced in her text her oldest son was killed courtesy of the U.S. government involvement in Vietnam. That was not something that he would have encountered had that political situation not occurred. She said she had lost other children along the way that they had buried out in the rocks in the sand of their native area. Loss was a part of life. She was not consumed in grief because she said, my children and their spirits and their bones were still with me. And then she said the fate worse than death, literally the fate worse than death for her two young children taken away because the United States government made a decision about who was allowed to be and who was not allowed to be. She's like, that was worse than losing any of my children to death because now I know they're alive, but they are no longer with me. They're not with our people. They're not in the land. They're not experiencing my culture. And that felt like torture. I was just like, damn it, United States, seriously, again? And so, I'm sorry, getting a little chucked up. I was consumed with some shame on behalf of what my government did and would continue to do. I think there's been a lot of publicity about, in addition to taking away the Native children from their families and their community and disallowing them from speaking their native language, they also were forced sterilizing women against their knowledge. They would go in to have a baby and they're like, oh, you have to come to the hospital. We have to do it. And then while they were under the care of physicians. They were being forcibly sterilized. It's a lot, Joey. So I'm going to transfer to a happier scene in the
Yeah,
story.
I wanted to talk about what you were just talking about. I was curious as to why her husband did not want the bones back, because you made a good point that she felt this connection to her loss of her very young children, because she could bury them and either visit their burial sites or just have that sort of comfort and knowledge knowing that their remains are close by, and so perhaps their spirits are then also close by. So it makes it so strange that her husband is like, no, we don't want his body back, because he's also from the same area. So you would assume that he is engaging with the same traditions, but he has one foot in this other white world. He's engaging with colonialism because he works for a white rancher who is completely not nice to him. He gets hurt on the job. I'm assuming it was on the job because he falls off a horse. And he's like, I'm not paying you until you can actually work. It's like, okay, well, why are there no workers' protections? But okay, sure, I get it.
And you have one day to get out because I hired somebody who's not broken. So get your stuff and go literally in a day. By sundown, hit the road.
Yeah, they took their living conditions too, their very humble abode as well. But yeah, it makes it very clear why there is such a divide between Aya and her husband, because they don't seem to like each other. We don't know why they got together or what that relationship looked like prior to the very beginning. They're already older and their relationship is already established, and all of this stuff has already happened. I'm sure saying he doesn't want Jimmy's remains back is a big deal. I was really curious what is going on here. Why does he feel like the outsider in their family? But that makes sense that that's something that the author was doing to underscore, that was to say, no, we do not honor my son's remains. We don't even want them around.
And it felt like he was bridging the gap because one of the lines she had, she's like, I've known this man for 40 years and he is still a stranger. So, as you said, is he estranged from her and their cultural tradition? Is he caught? I felt so sad for the husband because she said he spoke English. He also spoke Spanish. So, they were in a region where Spanish speakers were welcomed, right? He goes into the bar and everyone's speaking Spanish to him. And they're like, oh, okay, you can be in here. You're not a quote unquote dirty Indian. You're one of us. And she even uses language that has that similar tone that the other Indians were not welcomed in this social bar space because they were just not looked upon well. And the fact that she said we've been together for 40 years and she met him when he was 15 and now we're 55, that makes sense. He's dying of alcoholism. He gets hurt on the job. He loses his income. He loses his right to work. He loses his space. They have to go live in like basically a broken down building. When we never have any place to go ever, we can go back to this very primitive place that at least it's ours. And I was so sad for the husband. He starts drinking very heavily, which I think the literature will support that Native American Indians are very susceptible to alcohol use disorder. And that is a very prominent problem today for the Native American Indian population. So that was not a stretch that in 1970s, 80s, when she wrote this was very poignant. For me, it feels like he's getting dementia. He's having some sort of memory problems because he walks back to the ranch and says, you guys can't run this without me. You need me. I matter, right? It's all of that male identity, that closed offness. What am I without my job? And she says that's sort of when he starts fading away. She knows he's going. It's just that will to say, I think I'm done here. I'm going to drink myself to death. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. And yeah, that felt a little too close to home, Joey. It was just very sad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resentment that Aya has for her husband, whether it's because of his sort of inability to provide for their family in a financial way. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that might be the thing. But certainly the way that he engages with their Navajo traditions, which I'm not well versed in Navajo traditions, so I'm not going to pretend like I am. Reverence for the dead is, I'm assuming, would be a big one. There is a lot of resentment specifically because, as you said in the beginning, he's the one that teaches her how to write her name in English so that she can sign away Danny and Ella. Obviously, she doesn't know what she's signing because she can't read, like you said, but she blames him and has a lot of resentment, I'm sure, between that and with Jimmy's death and the denial of his remains that had to have just been adding fuel to the fire of the downfall of their relationship. And in the end, she shows him some compassion, really. I mean, she goes and collects him from the bar, as you were describing the scene where she comes in and with her white hair that's covered in snow and she's just like sort of drying out and warming up. And in the end, it sort of suggests that he might have died. Like he curls up and dies. That's what I got from the end of this story. I'm curious as to what you thought. But she's like, okay, share my blanket. Like, but your time has come. That is it for you. This is a wrap. And I'm not sure if she also dies in the end, and that's where she's sort of nostalgic about her childhood, and that's where the lullaby comes in. But their relationship dynamic, I think, was a really important aspect to this story. It takes up a lot of time to explain what's going on between them. And it only makes it a more tragic story because she doesn't have this partner to rely on or join her in the mourning of all of their children. They've lost all of their children now. Even though Danny and Ellis survived, she shows us that they come back twice. The first time they're like, hey, are we back? Like, we're good now? And they're like, no, your kids are sick. I'm assuming they're trying to say they have tuberculosis or some type of disease. I don't know. And then the second time they come back, they no longer can understand their native language. They don't look the same. And they're just like, can we go back to our home now? Because this is a stranger's house. So there's a lot of bad stuff. It's unfortunately a very sad story.
It was a very sad story, Joey. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned about the husband. He taught her how to sign her name, and we'll talk about that. But where was he when the people came? He could have been there to stop her from signing her name. And is it okay for just one parent to sign off that you are letting these people take your kids? So maybe the husband was also like, okay, our son went to war and he died. That happens. That's what warriors do. Okay, we're going to accept that. But my wife, because she's ignorant, because she never learned to read, because she just wanted to get rid of these people, she just did whatever she was told, not knowing the consequence. And I just want to read one section, Joey, because the author's word choice just was a knife to the heart. She said she hated Chateau, not because he let the policemen and the doctors put the screaming children in the government car, but because he had taught her to sign her name, because it was like the old ones always told her about learning their language or any of their ways. It endangered you. And just that word endangered, we think of endangered animals, endangered species. It's like, yes, her culture, her being, herself, she was put in danger by interacting in any way with the dominant white culture. They were not her friends. They were not her allies. They were not supporting her right to be who she was and who she wanted to be. She didn't want to leave her native land. She says, we end up staying in a house that had been the house I had been born in. She's in this area. She's so deeply rooted. And I thought that was just so interesting. And Joy, I know we have a question that you and I have been talking about, the expansive nature of time. This is a timeless story. She talks about, now I am an old woman. I'm taking you back to my childhood. I'm taking you back to my mother, sort of ignoring my first pangs of labor, going, it's not time yet, girl. I know. And then she's like, no, really, I think I need to go. And she's like, you are
Yeah.
correct. You are now ready to go. And she went to another place, the wisdom of a mom. She's like, yeah, everybody thinks the first time is the right time. It is not. It's always the second try. And that beautiful continuity of female wisdom, of mothers passing down generations of tradition, like the lullaby at the end. She's like, I don't know if I sang that to my own children, but I know my mother and my mother's mother and her mother gave this to me. And that scene with the social worker who brings her kids back, I think was so effective in all the things that it implied. She said, well, the white woman with blonde hair and her gold watch kept looking like, wrap it up, let's go. And we talk about this timelessness. She said there was a hawk circling overhead who had all the time in the world to wait when she took her kids away the first time, because she's like, these people are acting weird. I don't think I want them around my kids. So they go and hide in the hills for 3 or 4 days. And like the hawk, she thought she could wait them out. Oh, we escaped that danger. We live for another day. Well, the government people come back a couple days later and steal our kids. That floaty, timeless feeling was really effective. And then at the very last words of the story, she also references the timelessness of time. The one thing that never changes is infinite time.
Yeah, I think It was the most effective way to tell this story was for it to sort of all happen simultaneously. It would still be an impactful story to have it in a linear fashion, like this happens, this happens, this happens. But I think it sort of becomes like this overwhelming grief to the reader and to Aya because we are also experiencing all things all at once. We're trying to sort of catch our breath as she's trying to catch her breath. And then increases our aggravation with her husband because we're like, why can't you just behave here and do something nice for your wife that's not nice? So yeah, I think the timelessness of the story and the lack of a timeline was the smartest choice for this story.
Joey, I love that you said that because one of the things she also mentions, she said when she was a young girl, again, I'm so fixated on that image because it's so tactile for me, these big piles of fluffy wool that has just been sheared off the sheep. She said she remembers as a child playing with that, her grandmother giving her a comb to pick out the knits and to help refine the wool and watching her spin it. Then she talks about her mom weaving it. And this story is a broader weaving of modern problems, of ancient wisdom, of her alienation from her children, her desire to stay put where she was, that heartbreak the author brought. It's like we're weaving a story, we're weaving a culture, we are pulling apart all of the seams of this. She talks about the fraying blanket of her son that she put over her like a shroud, right? She's wearing it as a shawl. And she said it was frayed at the edges. And I was like, yeah, like your connection, like your marriage with your husband, like all of these things. You really nailed this in these subtle, tiny details, pulling us all back into that. Joe, you just made me think of this. When she goes to reclaim her husband. I don't know what else you would say when your husband's drunk.
To collect them,
Yeah, I'm going to collect my husband and say that I am still your wife. I still do care for you. She takes the blanket that she had for her son and she encompasses her husband in it too. Like their son is giving them a hug from the grave. It's like, this is the one thing that you have left of me. And I just thought it was really beautiful and really sad. And now I want to cry again, Joey. So I think I'll pass it back.
like, like I said, Silko does an amazing job of showing the interconnectedness of all things in this story. Everything means everything. Everything is tied together with each other. And as you're talking about the tradition from her childhood of her grandmother spinning the yarn and then her mother weaving it into this blanket that is so protective and warm, maybe not the most comfortable thing you've ever had, but it literally repels water because it's so tightly woven. It's this perfectly protective shell that she has created. And I think it really underscores the loss that she has with her own children because now she doesn't get to experience that generational exchange of knowledge or of a lullaby too because now her children are gone and she's past the age that she can have children. So all of those traditions, unless she has siblings, we don't know if she has any siblings or any other family outside of her nuclear family. We don't know. Are all of these things lost? I mean, that's the intention of the IAP and of the Native American boarding schools. They wanted Native Americans to lose their culture and traditions. They cut their hair, they changed their names, they forced them, with corporal punishment to speak English only. So they lost their language.
They gave them Christian religion.
Yes, and change the religion, that's important too. And change their diets, like literally everything.
An erasure.
Yeah, they accomplished the goal in her family at least because now all of that dies out with her if there's no one else to share that knowledge. And so it felt so intimate at the end when she does tell us the lullaby because it's almost like she's telling maybe the universe in this case, here is what I have to offer for prosperity. I can't teach you how to weave this blanket like my mother did and my grandmother did, but I can teach you this lullaby. The way that she's explaining the natural world around her as she's getting ready to sort of to go off into the sunset, I guess. She says the sky cleared. Aya saw that there was nothing between her and the stars. The light was crystalline. There was no shimmer, no distortion through earth haze. She breathed the clarity of the night sky. She smelled the purity of the half moon and the stars. He was lying on his side with his knees pulled up near his belly for warmth. His eyes were closed now, and in the light from the stars and the moon, he looked young again. And so There's no longer a shroud above them. The sky is literally clear. She can breathe in the clarity of the natural world, of the moon and the stars. It feels like this was her last chance to send off this message into the world, to be like, this is it. That's a wrap. Me and this guy, for good or for ill, this guy is with me and we're dying now. So I have to send off this message. And it's such a simple lullaby, but like I said, it's the perfect ending to this story. There's nothing that I could be like, this is how I would improve this story. There is nothing that I could think of. It's such a beautiful moment. It's sort of like the paper menagerie, how we learn the mother's words in the end. This is her family's final message to the world.
And we are the only ones here to hear it. Her children, who should rightfully have this tradition, these words, this language, this ability to connect with their mom, their heritage, it's come down from probably 100 generations. It is in their family. It is in the makeup of who they are. She knows she's dying. She knows her husband is dying. And when she said, he looks so young, Joey, I have, as we have talked about, witnessed both of my parents passing away. And the thing that I did not know, and I was like, well, that was really interesting, is that after they had passed, they looked like they were teenagers. Something physically about them lifted, like the weight of life went. When it happened with my mom, I'm like, well, that's weird, Dad. Like, we're going to have to watch out that for you. And then when it happened with my dad, I'm like, hey, this is a thing that happens. So the reason I bring this up is that for people who have not had that experience, you're like, sure, yeah, right. But for people who've lived through that experience, it is clear that she has witnessed this herself, because that's why she puts it in the story. And it takes you right to that moment where she was like, this is the end for us, and I have no one left to sing to. And that to me was like the death of culture, the death of this family line. It was just so incredibly sad. Joey, do you want to read that? I think that would be a great place for us to wind down our conversation.
I will read the paragraph before that too, and then the lullaby. Aya knew that with the wine he would sleep. He would not feel it. She tucked the blanket around him, remembering how it was when Ella had been with her. And she felt the rush so big inside her heart for the babies. And she sang the only song she knew to sing for babies. She could not remember if she had ever sung it to her children, but she knew that her grandmother had sung it and her mother had sung it. The earth is your mother, she holds you. The sky is your father, he protects you. Sleep, sleep. Rainbow is your sister, she loves you. The winds are your brothers, they sing to you. Sleep, sleep. You're together always, we are together always. There was never a time when this was not so. Probably someone else could do a better rendition of that, and not me. But it is such a beautiful moment. Like we were saying, I feel like this was her message to us, and it feels so intimate. The way you were explaining, like, this is supposed to go to her children, not to us, but we are the only people here. It feels like we're literally in the story. And she's like, you can't help me. You can't help this guy. He's drunk and he's dying. And so am I. Well, she's not drunk, but they're both dying. She's like, you're here. So I hope you pass this on to somebody. It's such a special moment. Again, what a genius. This is not a typical story. It seems very subtle and very quiet, but it is extremely complex. There's a lot of history that goes into this story that you do need to understand and have the context for. And there is a lot of metaphor, like you were saying with the frayed blanket. It's a story that you really need to sit with and read multiple times, because there is just so much in it. I don't know if that's a real lullaby or if she made that up for the story. I guess I'll have to look that up now. But I just feel like it's such a special moment as a reader when you get to that point and you realize this is the gift that Aya is giving us as the reader to share with others. So again, there is this sense of interconnectedness where she is connected with us, we're connected with the author, we're connected with this lullaby, now we're connected with the sky. It's just like everything, all things are connected.
And this is for us, Joey. Just witnessing you say that out loud. I read this to myself. I did not read it aloud. And when it said, we are together always, we are together always, they're never, see, I can't even get through it. We are together always. We are together always. There never was a time when this was not so. That for me, she was like, even though my kids are not here, one is killed in combat, others have died of natural causes. The other two children are living, but their souls have been murdered. They're no longer connected to this family. That's okay, because we're all still together. We're still under the same sky. We are still one, we will always be one, and we always were one. And so I just love the enduring resilience of that feeling of try as you might, universe, people, bad guys, American government, whoever, we're still here. We're still connected. Death does not part us. It just reunites us in a different way. And I just really thought that was a very hopeful and beautiful message, especially in the moment we're in the season we're in right here in 2025.
It's even more heartbreaking because she can't remember if she told this to Danny and Ella. What if she did do it? What if she had the opportunity to have told them this lullaby and have them commit it to memory? Would that have changed? Would they have been able to hold on to their culture and tradition and their family? I mean, they were children and they were being literally abused, psychological abuse, physical abuse, and all that kind of stuff. So, like, it's not their fault that they lose these things.
Yeah, by their rescuers, Joey, let's be very clear. They were safe at home until they were taken.
Yeah, and they're obviously fine, and they weren't even sick. They were saying, like, "Oh, their grandmother gave them some type of coughing disease, that's why I thought it was tuberculosis, I don't know. Could have been, like, pneumonia or something." She's like, "No, the whites are lying. They're lying. Their kids are fine. I'm their mother, I know." But, yeah, it's so tragic, but what would have happened to these kids had they remembered that lullaby if they were told it? But we'll never know because, unfortunately, we end with their deaths.
Well, Joey, they grew up to read and they're reading the story. So, for all the children that were lost, that entire generation of kids who had their culture stripped away, the Native American Renaissance is bringing all of that back. So, it may not have been your actual grandmother or your mom who told you these stories, but someone who understands you so intimately is saying this to you. She did commit it to memory. It is here. We're never going to forget, right? We are together always. We are together always. There never was a time when that was not so. We talk about this a lot here about empathy and compassion and looking for the similarities in the way in which we're experiencing the world and not the differences that can divide us. And in this season of reflection and connection and community, this was just the perfect message for me today. Thank you for bringing that to us, Joey.
As always, I find the story.
Or the story finds us. I don't know. Don't know,
Yeah,
Joey.
they come about. There's lots of great stories out there, and all we gotta do is just find them and read them, and then we share them with everyone else. I hope everyone reads this story because I think it's so beautiful, and I think I'll put it on par with The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu, which is one of our favorites here at Extra Literary Affairs, because it does have that emotional impact, and so if you think that short stories cannot affect you in some way, this is 6 pages. I'm pretty sure it's even shorter than The Paper Menagerie was. So it's an emotional one.
Yeah. And timeless.
Yes, next week we're going to be reading War Dances by Sherman Alexie, who I referred to in the beginning.
Indeed, you did. He did the beautiful movie Smoke Signals. So if you have an opportunity to watch that movie, it's so good. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.